So, ladies and gentlemen, our debate today, who has or should have the power? The year is 2045. House Speaker Henry McKee and Senate Majority Leader Gabby Gongora have mastered an amazing piece of legislation that will allow one of the branches to expand their powers. You are responsible for representing a branch of the government and explaining why your branch has or should have the most power. There will be no equal branches group, okay? So there has to be one branch having the most power. You will debate for the right for your branch to have the most power. Explain why your branch takes precedent over the other two. Because it is written in the Constitution first, we default to the legislative branch and the Honorable Malachi Plancher.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. The legislative branch is established by the United States Constitution in Article 1. This branch of government consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate. The primary function of this branch is to create laws that serve the common good of the people. The branch is made up of directly elected officials voted for by the people. The legislative branch has larger influence than the other branches, even in the subject of money or trade, taxes, and most importantly, a social contract within the people. Neither the judicial or executive branch have this. While some may say that the branch has enough power, or too much already, this is the only branch where people choose their representatives through election, and unlike the other branch where government figures are appointed indirectly. The legislative branch gives far more representation than the executive and judicial. Not to mention that the executive and judicial branch only have jobs because of the legislative branch. If you think carefully of the way the branches were defined, the legislative branch makes laws, the executive enforces them, and the judicial interprets them. When you look at the basic functions, the legislature has a mandate to create laws, and the other two branches in some sense are reactive. Therefore, I think it's quite obvious which branch deserves more power.
Thank you. A representative from the executive branch, would you like to rebuttal that fact or state your own?
You say the power stems from the legislative branch, but by your logic, also, if the executive branch was not there to keep people in, make sure people have peaceful protests instead of going out and defacing public buildings, if a law was made that was not agreed with by the people, well, then the legislative branch would be hurt, and the executive branch should be able to protect the people and the lawmakers and the judges from harm.
Okay. Judicial, and then we'll open up the floor for everybody. So, Ian.
As we all know, the judicial branch is the most powerful branch of government today, and I think it should stay that way. The judicial branch has the most power because it can monitor the two other branches the most. Certain instances include, according to E-Notes, the branch being able to declare a law unconstitutional, making laws that are produced by the legislative branch fair, as well as doing this to the executive branch and making sure that the executive branch is being constitutionally right. And this is very fair because it ensures that the other branches are being fair, while the judicial branch is also checked by other branches. The executive branch checks the judicial branch to make judicial branch by appointing all judges, and the legislative branch can amend the Constitution to make it more fair for them. While the judicial branch is the most powerful branch, it still can't abuse its powers as much as the other branches. For example, the Supreme Court has 9 justices, and 5 of them must agree to declare something unconstitutional. But they can't really abuse that much power because they are the glue that keeps everything together, because everything comes back to them. Say the president is impeached, then the Supreme Court try that case, and if they're an important problem in society that's already been tried by the lower courts, Then if people want to be reviewed, then the Supreme Court reviews the case through something called writs of certiorari. In conclusion, the Supreme Court should stay with the most power because they have the least control over the people and the most power to monitor the other branches. So the judicial branch is like a referee for the political game.
Okay, the floor is now open, so all three have stated their cases. It's going to be an open forum, so if you have something to say, you can unmute yourself. If not, you can take a stand in front.
So, as the judicial branch, or specifically Ian said, they have the least power over the people. What they do doesn't pertain to, well, it pertains to the people, but not as much as the legislative branch does. Our branch does things that deals directly with the people. We are the people's voices. The people pick us, and they give us the power so we can create laws for them. What the executive and judicial branch are, because of what we do, they do something. They only have jobs because we do something. If we didn't exist, neither would they.
Bold statement. So if the legislative branch didn't exist, there would be no other of the branches? Any rebuttal, any facts from any other group?
Might I say U.S., not U.S., just not in general, U.S.
Eugenia, go ahead.
The judicial branch has the power to declare laws unconstitutional and, in fact, helps protect the people. Because if a case is severe enough to go to the Supreme Court can take somebody extremely dangerous out of the public population. People won't die. Or less people will, obviously. The Supreme Court relates also directly to the people. They may not be directly elected from the people, but they help keep the people safe by not incriminating, ignore that word. By taking people who are dangerous to the majority of the population and putting them in jail or giving them consequences. The people are safer because of the judicial branch. So the judicial branch deserves more power to keep the people safer.
Ian, you want to support that?
To support to go against what Malachi said and support that, you say that the judicial branch isn't influenced as much by the people, but technically the people elect the president, which elects the Supreme Court. So the president, therefore, uses their ideas and what they believe in to choose a justice on the Supreme Court.
Okay, Alina, go ahead.
So I'd like to go along the lines of where the judicial branch is, the executive branch appoints the judges for the judicial branch, and they can veto the legislative branch's laws. So you could put more power into that, and it wouldn't be that bad, and then we could appoint more people to make sure that the power is in check, so there's still balance.
So when you say appoint more people, what do you mean? Appoint more people to where?
People to watch, to make sure that there's not one person's abusing the power, to separate the power between people.
Okay, so to help include separation of powers then, right? Anybody else open that up? Go ahead, Malachi.
Let me just say this. So both you, Ian, and Alina talked about indirect appointing. What is that? Well, that's when, because he said the legislative branch picks the president. He said the people pick the president, and the president picks the judges. Well, that's two different people has to go through. And on top of that, the president isn't elected directly by the legislative branch. The legislative branch has to elect members of the Electoral College. What is the Electoral College? It's basically, so legislatures from different states, they pick different people to vote for the president. So if the state senator wants to pick someone for to be, what's it called, like an electoral college member, that person is voting for the president. So that's not directly the people. Then on top of that, you have the president who's not directly elected for the people, by the people, goes and elects judges. This is way off the scale. It would be better if the legislative branch had the power to directly pick the president, because it wouldn't be a whole bunch of chaos and it would be directly the people. The legislative branch is the people's voices, because everyone, so most people vote, and when they vote for representatives. These representatives, they carry out laws and all these kinds of things. So if we have the representatives picking the legislative and judicial branch, we're having the voices of the people in all three branches. It just makes more sense to have the legislative branch have more power.
So before I get Eugenia next, just to summarize what you said, you're essentially then talking about changing our form and system into more of a parliamentary system, in which, like England, where they have the people choose the parliament then chooses the prime minister. So that kind of format, correct? Okay. Eugenia, go ahead. And then after Eugenia, George.
We are debating which branch should have more power in our current government system, in a indirect democracy or representative democracy. What you're talking about would be changing our entire government system and to where the legislative branch pretty much rules the national government completely. It'd be changing us from a representative to a direct democracy. And that wasn't the question. The question was which branch should have more power, not if we should change our branch, our form of government from representative to direct. So.
All right, George, go ahead.
So automatically when you think one branch having most power, you think tyranny, but that wouldn't be the case because Congress is so revolved around the people. So even the congressmen are elected by people. It's all by the people. So while the members of other branches they're not revolved around the people, and Congress is almost completely controlled by people. So it'd be very fair since it's since there would be no abusive power or tyranny. So it would basically lead to less I guess you could say there would be more agreement because it would be strictly by the people and not just in the hands of government, so people would understand.
All right, Laura, go ahead.
So you say that because it's by the people, there can be no tyranny. But there are many instances where a dictator is elected to their position, elected by the people. That can still lead, it's by the people still leads to tyranny if it's, are you legislative or judicial?
Legislative.
George.
Right.
Legislative.
Okay. So, yeah. And also going back to what Malachi said, you said two things that very straightly contradicted each other. You said that the legislative branch should have overarching power over everything, from what I heard. And you also said that since it's the same logic, same flawed logic, because it's the people electing it, the people can't do no wrong. I have a few points that do not relate to that.
All right, go ahead.
You said that's from earlier. Okay, no, the executive branch, compared to all the other branches, is the largest and goes into pretty much every aspect of people's lives. If you give it more power, the more power will be distributed evenly across the entirety of it. And because of that, it's harder to have concentrated power and concentrated tyranny. Also, if the executive branch was weaker than the others, the executive branch is basically the face of our country. The president represents our country to ambassadors represent our country. Our police force, in a way, our army represents the country. If they are weak, then other countries will see us as weak, which will hurt every aspect of people's lives. It will hurt trade. It will lead some countries, because most wars come out because one side was stronger and they wanted to make the rules. So the problem, if the executive branch is weak, then it will cause a chain effect that will lead to everyone's lives being a lot worse than before.
Okay. Alina, go ahead.
Kind of like to go along like
Nice
the
one, nice
lines
one.
of like when we're talking about how Malachi said about the legislative taking over everything. Still, the question is if we give more power, and you're talking about changing our whole government, and what our founding fathers wanted to prevent was tyranny. And if the legislative branch takes over everything, it's tyranny, and we have failed to do what our founding fathers were trying to prevent.
Okay. Ian, go ahead, and then we'll come back to Malachi, and then we'll go back to online.
If you say, to refute what Laura said, you say that if we gave the executive branch more power, then it would be more spread out. While that may be correct, if they have the most influence on our life at home, then if we give them more power, then if we have a president who doesn't have the same views as us, then our country would become less free and less constitutionally right.
Malachi, and then we'll jump back online.
So to go off what Ian said, because he made a really good point. So you were talking about how the legislative branch being dictators. Well, if we have an executive branch as a dictator, because this is what England was. The King George executive branch had a whole bunch of power. So like, basically what you're saying is we should give the president a lot of power. Also, you said that the president is the representative of our country. And if our country is weak, then it's going to be represented in the president. Well, actually, no. Because if the president is representative of our country, then he'll be representing the people if the legislative branch control it, if you think about it. And then, I think it was Alina and Eugenia, I think both said it, that if we give more power to the legislative branch to, like, basically influence the other branches, we're changing the whole government. Well, giving a whole bunch of power to the executive or judicial is changing the government as well. So that point is invalid. And on top of that, our government is meant to change. It was created to change. That's why it's amendable.
All right, Laura, to back up your part, and then I'll go to George and Amelia.
So good.
So you talk about King George, you talk about Britain, but the thing is, King George had started his reign at the end of near the end of the 7 Years' War. His advisors and Parliament were the ones who told him, hey, this is a good idea. And being a new king, he said, yeah, it is a good idea. I should listen to you. You guys were the ones who, know better than me. And then he started taking over. Parliament led to that. Parliament, the legislative branch.
Okay, George, go ahead.
The government is so able to adapt to change, it would be necessary. And legislative has not has the decision by the people for new laws and new adaptations to help come around to new things and help going further into that. So there would be more decisions that would help because of the adaptation.
Okay, Amelia?
The executive branch was originally feared by the makers of this country due to their previous experiences with Britain. At first, the central government did not have much power due to this, which caused lots of chaos. Rather than fearing this position because of past experiences, we should be more open to the idea of giving this branch power whilst keeping a healthy level of checks and balances so that it does not get out of hand. It is important that we have a strong leader that can represent the country fairly, equally, and symbolize America and its people. Whereas early presidents were selected by a small number of electors, modern presidents are selected by hundreds of electors who represent citizens nationwide. More generally, the president is responsible for making sure that laws be faithfully executed. It is vital to have knowledge with morals. Knowing information will serve nothing if one has the wrong state of mind. The executive branch, as stated earlier, ensures that laws are faithfully executed. How could one live knowing that they are living in a society where that power to execute those laws correctly is valued less? A country where this is not regulated would be chaotic and horrendous. Now, one may state that the president could be corrupt and mess up the country. This would not be the case if the people elect a great leader. As we know, the people represent the country. America is ranked as one of the higher up countries within the world, actually listing in the top percentage, which means that the people can be trusted to elect a great leader, which will represent the country, therefore proving that the executive branch should have more power.
All right. So one thing that I've heard from a couple groups now is the executive branch is the personification of America. They are the symbol of America, right? So does the symbol of America always mean that they have the most power or they need to have the most power? Or does it mean quite the opposite? Are they just the figurehead and not the workhorse behind the government? What does the symbol absolutely necessarily mean power? Malachi?
So to answer his question, no, just because someone is a symbol of something doesn't mean that person is doing all the work or has all the power. When we look at when we look at a TV, we think that the screen is what's doing everything, but no, it's really everything inside the TV, the wires, all of that stuff. That's what's really doing the work. It's the things and the people behind the scenes that do the work. And in this case, this is the legislative branch. The legislative branch, which is elected by the people, is what gets everything to work. The judicial branch, the executive branch, would have nothing to do if the legislative branch just sat there. Because the legislative branch it does everything. It takes care of just about everything. I mean, yes, obviously the executive and judicial branches are needed for a stable and foundational government. But when we look at it, we're a democracy, and the people is what matters. And having the people's voices heard is what matters. And then Laura, you said that Parliament told King George what to do. Well, Parliament wasn't exactly representative of the people, and we saw that, and that's why America broke away from them.
All right. Amelia, go ahead. And then Laura. And then George.
Thank you, Malachi. I 100% agree with you on the one statement you said that America is a democracy. America is a representative democracy, meaning that the people elect their representatives. So then, the representatives elect the higher up representatives, which would be the president, meaning that the president is one of the key figures of the country.
Okay. Laura?
So, first off, I never said the symbol should be the most powerful. I said because that is the face of our country, because our military goes out. It does things for other countries sometimes. So, if we are seen as weak, we are less likely to be able to use our influence to help other countries. And if our influence goes away, other countries might not be willing to trade with us, again, ruining everyone's lives. And Malachi, you said that the legislative branch is behind doing everything. So we are your puppets? The legislative branch is the puppeteer, controlling everything? That sounds a lot like tyranny. And if the executive and judicial branches didn't exist, Malachi, the the laws that the legislative branch makes that you hold so dear they would just be ignored by the people. What do you expect to happen if you have rules, but you don't have consequences? What happens then? There's no point in the rules.
Okay, George, go ahead. Great point, Laura.
Back to what Amelia said previously before Malachi, she said that she said she's with executive and she said that executive has the power to enforce the laws, but they have the power to enforce, they don't have the power to create. So eventually laws would become outdated and we would be behind and there would be new changes that they wouldn't be able to adapt to because they only have power to enforce laws and not create.
Okay. Ian, go ahead.
I would like to comment on something Amelia said earlier when she was talking about the president being appointed by the people, and that the people, if they elect a good leader, then there shouldn't be any problems. But if it ever were to happen that there was a bad leader elected, the judicial branch is one of their main points is to amend or declare certain things unconstitutional, like executive orders and laws that were passed by the legislative branch, and make it more fair through judicial review.
Okay, Alina?
So back to what was said about the
Super loud.
So back to what was said about the laws, like when you sign, like when you're trying to like enforce them, you need the executive branch to do that. The legislative branch can't just be like, oh, I have this, because write something and pass it by both parts, and it's just a law. It's not. Because remember, you have to still has to be sent to the president. It's still a bill has to be sent to the president to be signed into a law. If the legislative branch took over and there was only the legislative branch, we wouldn't really have new laws because there would be no president to sign the laws into existence.
All right, George, go ahead. Rebuttal.
But without that, like we wouldn't just be able to not have new ones. There would be new ones coming into play, and just because you can enforce them doesn't mean that there would be room for like play or anything to have new change.
Okay. Malachi, you started us off, finished us off. Last statement, Malachi.
Okay, so to what Laura said about how the executive branch, if they didn't have the power to like enforce, and just like Alina said, enforce, she said, never mind. But obviously, if we have more power, doesn't mean you guys don't have any power at all. It just means we have more. So you're still gonna have the power to enforce and all of this stuff. And then the thing about it is, our branch of government is what changes the government. We create amendments. We get, like George said, get rid of outdated laws. We are the ones who change everything and do what the people want. Like, the judicial branch just looks at the constitutionality of something. It's just like, oh, that's not constitutional. We, create the Constitution. We create the rules and guidelines. And you guys just help people follow them and make sure they're right. That's all you guys do. And it only makes sense, and it's only fair that we get more power. Because A, we're the people. B, we change the government. We, really take just about every aspect of what you need in a country. Laws, taxes, money, regulating trade, all this stuff is done by us. It only makes sense that we have more power. Because sure, the president is the representative of our country, and like Laura said, oh, it's going to be weak. No, just because the president doesn't have all the power doesn't mean that he's weak. It just means that the legislative branch has more power. Because the president can't do much when it comes to starting war. Because we start war. So it doesn't make sense for the other branches to have more power when they don't do anything to set our government in motion.
Okay, all right, with that, I know a few of you want to say a few more things, but we're about 30 seconds until the bell, so I will see you guys. Overall, great job. We'll debrief and we'll talk about it next class on Monday, so I will see you guys. Have a great weekend.